So application development has changed. There's more software being deployed in more environments, but there's less available time to secure it. Well, the security responsibility has shifted away from dedicated security teams. It's now shared between application security and development teams. And in this webinar, we will discuss the application security landscape, how to build trust between application security and development teams, and how both checkmarks and SD elements can address risk throughout the software development lifecycle. Before we jump into the topic, I want to introduce our panelists for today. We are joined by David, Senior Product Partnership Manager from Checkmarx. Hey, David, how are you?
Hi, everyone. Very happy to be here, Chip, and be with you.
Yeah, glad to have you, David. We're joined by Sarah, Product Manager here at Security Compass. Hey, Sarah, how are you?
Hello, I am doing great. Thank you very much.
And I'm Chip, and I'll be your host for today. So the stats you see here come directly from the 2024 Checkmarx State of Application Security Report. David and Sarah, as you see these numbers initially, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is a trend we saw since the past few years, but this year we reached very high numbers. And what I was actually very surprised is that the problem that we see behind these numbers and the main issue we see behind these numbers is the fact that companies have the tool to detect the vulnerabilities, right? It's not a question of whether I have the tool, whether I've implemented it correctly, whether I know how to use the tool. Companies know they have vulnerabilities. And it's the fact that companies knowingly release applications that have vulnerabilities in them and eventually encounter breaches, because 92% of them had a breach due to the application that they developed themselves. So there is definitely something wrong that is not related about tooling or technology, but maybe more, and this is what we talk about today, about how these tools are being used. What is the thought process of building an application?
Yeah, 100%. I think like when I look at these stats, I think of how many people probably have been affected based on these stats, like human individuals. Data breaches can harm users and their livelihoods, which probably have happened to us in one day or another. So I feel like like you mentioned, David, in this today's world and in this world of technology, I think it's becoming a little bit more prevalent and necessary to really foster a security first culture mindset, because these stats are really showing that security by design is extremely important and necessary.
I think one thing to jump on, I agree with both your assessments is, you guys see this here too, it's from, following the human aspect is customers should not be responsible for securing their own data. For instance, most people aren't expert in security, so when I see these numbers, it should not be on a customer user to have strong passwords, use a second factor to secure their own data. Again, most people aren't expert in security, and people expect their products to be secure out of the box. And I see here organizations must prioritize application security. Now, one thing that actually there's an opportunity here that I do see for organizations is that if there are companies, organizations that are prioritizing application security or product security, they have a clear business and competitive advantage over other organizations that are not. Okay. So the data here is based on the question we talked about earlier about, David, the question you guys asked developers about the challenges, concerns, and preferences around enterprise AppSec programs. Any initial thoughts from David or Sarah from you when you see these numbers?
I think the common pattern I really see, speaking to both I've spoken to both security and developer personas, there's a clear problem with communication, and there's a clear opportunity to see how we can solve that collaboration within an organization. The more I learn about each side, it's clear that the lack of communication is more related to the fact that they're not monitoring security, and they're monitoring security, but they're monitoring them in very silo approaches. So I feel taking that time to establish a fundamental bridge that allows both of the teams to communicate and collaborate in a shared set of tools, that's going to be the start of something magical in the developer security lens, as we see like these stats are pretty wild. So I think those are the first steps to help that maturity.
Yeah, definitely. And when you look at these numbers, at the two numbers on the right-hand side, they can be solved by technology, right? It's about the difficulty of knowing what to fix and how to fix, and the lack of content to remediate vulnerabilities. We released a couple of months ago an auto-remediation feature on our Visual Code, where our component can analyze the vulnerability, analyze the code of the developer, and provide the fix to it. And this is the kind of feature and technology that can help developer to remediate. And about how to prioritize the risk, we bring runtime context within the vulnerabilities. We bring business context in order for developers to understand what and AppSec managers, how critical is this risk. So this can be solved by technology, but the first one is not. The first one is really a concept of, because developers historically have been put aside from the decision making on tooling, on processes of how to deal with security issues. This process needs to be rethought and redesigned within enterprise. And this is what we've been doing for the past 2-3 years at Checkmarx, is to involve more and more developers, not only during the decision process of we need to buy a tool, which tool to buy, but also about providing features that help them in their day-to-day work, that improve their performance, make them focus more and more into the features and the business features that they need to develop, and at the same time provide secure code.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead, Sarah.
I was going to add on exactly the tools that Checkmarx and SD Elements bring is really helping automate those tools as well. Because again, developers and CISOs or security practitioners are not always in the same room. These tools are like the step in the middle, like difficulty of fixing and prioritizing. They don't know, they have their own ideas of what needs to be prioritized. But I think having a shared tool with the right automations, they'll really actually help that communication through their whole SDLC. So I think between the Checkmarx One tools and some features that we have in SD Elements, that really paves that way.
There, you made a few good points, and I know you talked about the latter two data points. SDLMs can solve as well. Like, for instance, our expansive security content, we keep this up to date, can definitely help. Let's say application security, you don't have to do any more manual search anymore. We provide the most up-to-date content with you, and especially we will score based on, like, to say you run a threat model, or depending on what you put in a survey, we'll prioritize like the countermeasures or weaknesses that you should address. Now, I do think with getting away the development process, so you're talking security by design, and this is where I think too, it's the importance of kind of that organizational buy-in. And that I think too, it's how do we get developers and security on the same page? I think it has to come from the top down. That security has to be, it is a priority. Customer security is a priority.
Yeah, and this is why this partnership between Security Compass and Checkmarx makes so much sense, and it's so natural, because we have this approach of finding the vulnerability as soon as the developer starts to write some code. And you have the approach of thinking about security before designing the application, and having a security by design application. And I think this is the way of not having security entering in opposition to the functional or the business features to develop, because they are already scheduled and planned beforehand, even before the feature itself would be designed. So this is definitely the approach of reversing these numbers. Yeah, what I wanted to discuss here with there's the help of this slide is how Checkmarx see the different personas involved in the application security space. And by presenting it on a graph, and this is something that we've been breathing at Checkmarx for a couple of years now, is really to make sure we don't forget any of these personas. And we help, thanks to the product and the tools and the processes that we help companies to put in place, to create trust between these personas. And so only when you bring trust to them and the tools support this trust, that you can really have high-performing companies from a security standpoint and from a business standpoint. So obviously the three personas are the CISO, the AppSec professionals, and the developers. And if you think about it, they have very different KPIs. They have very different objectives in life. They don't wake up in the morning for the same things, but they're part of the same company and they need to look into the same direction. And the CISOs are more specifically focused on identifying and mitigating the business risk, be able also to put numbers and assess the current business risk and compare to the evolution from the past, demonstrating the value of all the security processes and resources that they are consuming, and obviously make sure that security is being adopted across the organizations. AppSec focus more on, oh, sorry, Sarah.
No, go on.
AppSec focus more on, tactically speaking, what are the vulnerabilities, the highest risk applications. The company and the engineering team within the highest risk that have been identified, being able to define what is a critical application and how to track it, and track different terms, different KPIs in the AppSec. That could be the MTTR, so the mean time to remediation, or the vulnerability density, or other type of KPIs that needs to be tracked over time. And developer obviously wake up in the morning to develop new features, provide new products, and have the company do more and more business thanks to the creation of these new products. And every company is a software company, right? So it doesn't matter really what the business is. What matters is that creation piece of the software development part. Now, they have a lot of pressure of delivering in time, and they have so many processes now. When you look at the CI/CD process, it's just not one or two steps, right? It's really often 5, 6, 7 different steps. One of them being the security assessments. And we talk about security assessments. We have many different pace of security assessments. You have the static analysis, you have the supply chain security, you have secrets detection. You have so many elements that are part of the software development life cycles. They are actually facing security every day and every minute. And if the tools are defined at the right place for them, that are coordinated with the CISO and the AppSec, that everybody knows what are the KPIs. If it's designed in advance, what are the security measures that need to be put in place? And the developer has the tools, even within his own IDE, doesn't need to get out of his IDE. He can use his own IDE and have the tool, the checkmarks plugin within the IDE, and see the vulnerabilities, understand the risk, see how it can be remediated. This is, from my perspective, a key for success.
Yeah, I think I 100% agree. I think when I look at like a CISO and AppSec and developers, they all are speaking different languages, like you're saying, like they all looking for different things. And when I look at how we can actually build trust, it's really like first, they have to align their goals and objectives, right? At the end of the day, they have to set a common goal, emphasizing security as the part of quality of the software. But I think that is like the big stepping stone, because they're all currently in their own silos. They all know different aspects of security. And I think the next thing that follows that is actually, how does a developer come into the CISO and AppSec world? They are the ones building the code, automating and implementing like CI/CD automations is like a huge piece of really understanding and having the CISO and AppSec personas actually understand what's really going on, using the actual code and putting into the pipelines, using our tools. And I think also we've highlighted that developers don't always get the most training when it comes to security. I think AppSec and CISOs have a little bit more knowledge when it comes to these things, that, conducting these sessions and making collaborative security issue resolution are like a high priority, I think. And then when we think about how vendors like Checkmarx One and SD Elements really provide that, they provide those necessary requirements and those remediation steps to really integrate that DevOps workflow. So I think really it's crucial for developers and security teams to really collaborate on the right tools together.
I also see this as a good framework for our solutions is buying an application security solution. We talked about earlier. I know that the poll questions are developers playing a role. David, I know Checkmarx, I think your study found that 50% of developers now themselves playing a role in the purchase decision. Stack Overflow, the developer survey recently too, that highlighted the same thing. And as I see it, say your organization's going through buying an application security solution, hitting these goals for each group is important. I think especially developers too. I think especially finding someone that meets needs developers is important.
Yeah, I think it's also a mindset for vendors like Checkmarx and Security Compass. When we develop a feature, we always think about, okay, what is this feature is providing for CISOs, what is it providing for AppSec, for developers. And I know you also have, we saw in the demo, a very strong developer experience as well. And I think this is like the mindset that we need to have. And this is something that we cultivate internally in order to prioritize also requirements, prioritize features. So, okay, this answers to 2 or 3 personas. This is a high priority. Or we want to increase because we evaluate that our product might be weaker in one approach in time because we focus a lot on the persona, then we focus on the other personas. This is really critical to keep that in place.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was exactly going to say, it's honestly a mindset change, because people, like, if our organization was very much just focused on a CISO or a security practitioner. And I think that is the top-down approach, like Chip mentioned. But I think at the end of the day, we have to think of all the different mindsets and personas, because it's like not all one shoe fits the situation. We have to be inclusive on all scenarios. And I think we're slowly doing a really great job on including the developer mindset and becoming more dev-centric, which I think is really powerful.
Dave, turn you talk about check marks.
Yeah, so I didn't want to swamp you with many different slides of check marks. There is a lot available on our website, but for this specific presentation, I wanted to highlight how check marks fit into the software development lifecycle and where the integration with Security Compass fits in. And as we said, we really want to make sure that we are covering all these three different personas, but not only at the beginning, in the middle, or at the end of the development lifecycle, but throughout the development lifecycle. Because if you lose one piece of these different components, this is where you break the trust. So it's focusing on the different personas, but also on all the different steps, so that customers feel that they are covered and they are supported by checkmarks and by SD elements in order to go from the inception of the project down to the delivery. And this diagram, it talks by itself, right? The software development lifecycle. We have a checkmarks, a code bashing product, which is our learning management systems that train developers either to become better security developers in a specific language, or a just-in-time training for a specific vulnerability that they need to fix right now. They have 5-10 minutes training. And most of our other products are built within our Checkmarx One platform, which covers different aspects of the code. We do static analysis for the code written by developers. We have an SCA engine for everything related to open source vulnerabilities. We do API security. We inventorize all the API endpoints we find in the code, and we find what we call shadow APIs for APIs that are not documented properly. We have a Dast engine. We do container security, infrastructure as code security, and we have integration with CNAPP partners to bring cloud insights and enrich the findings with cloud information, like where my container is being deployed, is it facing internet, has this open source package been detected at runtime. This allows to increase or decrease the risk score of vulnerability. And for the Security Compass integration specifically, where we are very strong, is that ability at the design phase, where Security Compass can tell you which countermeasures you need actually to take care of, depending on your environment, depending on your business. Then we're able to, thanks to scan results, tell Security Compass whether that countermeasure has been indeed implemented correctly or not, or partially, and this is something that we'll show a demo. But I think it was important to see different engines of Checkmarx One and where the integration with Security Compass and SD elements fits.
I think, David, to complement what you're saying, or just to add on in the design phase, so yeah, best elements here, our goal is really to automate software threat modeling. We want to deliver relevant countermeasures, compliance best practices, but we talk about developer experience and provide us actionable requirements right into developer workflow. That's something we're big on here, is providing a strong developer experience.
Yeah, so as like Chip mentioned, SD Elements tool really focuses on the automated threat modeling and also provides that strong security requirements. And we have training alongside that diagramming. But I think it's really also important to highlight that within our SD Elements tool, we also provide strong integration ecosystem on top of these features, which I think is very crucial. So SD Elements providing various introductions to send or receive, we can really provide that and aid a holistic kind of understanding of companies' security posture within the application throughout their SDLCs. Our tools not only helping mitigate risk, but also enhancing overall security management, which I think is something we will, of course, showcase today with Checkmarx One and SD Elements.
All right, and now we're going to demo what the integration between Checkmarx One and SD Elements looks like.
Before we start the demo. Oh, yeah, you can pause. As we talk about the future AppSec, I think what we want to highlight is the power of AppSec when it comes to these integrations we successfully done with Checkmarx One. To start, we do need to create a project within SD Elements, so which we'll showcase today. It hosts under an application, which in SD Elements means the actual software product the end user intends to build, whether it's a mobile application, web service, web application, etc. So with that, now, Chip, you can start the demo. And as we showcase creating a project, even though it's under an application, the project can encompass either the entirety of the application if needed, but also be broken up like between portions, so infrastructure, front end, et cetera. So this really all depends on, oh, if you can pause for a second. Seems like it's going a little bit faster than I intended. This all really depends on the architecture structure as well and how the teams track their work. So if you continue, thank you. But yeah, so you will go ahead and add that in. You'll have all these different additions. And then once you've actually created the project, you will be chosen preferred method. So either manual input via survey or draw a diagram. And alternatively, you have an option to import diagrams from an external source. So that allows you to continue diagramming from existing work. So to illustrate both survey and diagram, I've gone ahead and selected survey. And then before entering the survey, we do offer actual project profiling, which allows you to predefine the project based off a list of specific profiles. So it can be a generic app, Android app. We have many more options as you see. This feature provides a little bit more efficiency when onboarding, which also allows you the ability to create your own predefined profile, which can be done in the library for future use. I've selected Java here. And then once you've chosen a profile, whether it's empty or predefined, you'll be directed to actually the survey within SD Elements. So within the survey, you'll notice different categories, subcategories. It provides multiple choice questions for teams to answer to help describe the project. So as you see, some of the answers are already populated as we go through this based off the pre-selected profile. And in result, it unlocks questions as well. So our survey has dependencies. So when you build out, you can see .NET and C++, they're grayed out because they weren't selected. So yeah, within here, I'm selecting additional components, as you can see. And this is perfect because you go through each of the layers and the categories, and it really allows you to select as many to really power that countermeasure selection. So you can update the survey multiple times, but once you are ready, which will take you slowly into the summary. Here you'll see that we have a summary of exactly selected components, whether the profile selected it or whether you select it manually, providing that transparency. So you have the option to move to the summary or move to the diagram. So obviously I will take you to the diagram. With the diagram interface, you actually have several options. You can generate the diagram based on survey answers. You can import a diagram from an external source, and you can build a diagram manually if necessary. So this use case, I'm going to generate the diagram to showcase the automated aspect. And yes, I know it looks like a limited overview, but it really starts to offer that basic summary of your project, allowing further refinement. So here you can see that I'm arranging components into sections, or what we call zones, and we add additional components into you can move those and add additional components to interact with that application. As you can see, I'm adding the little end user here to encompass how maybe the user will interact with that application. And additionally, you can actually modify or remove generated components. So for instance, if you are using a specific database here, you can actually update it accordingly. It is important to know that if you do delete components, it will trigger a notification indicating that the diagram is now out of sync to the survey answer select. It's also important to know that within SD Element, I don't showcase it here, but in fact, we offer the ability to include custom components as well as reusable components. These are really valuable because custom components allow you to add specific components that meet your organizational needs when building that diagram. So it's catered to you. And then reusable components is actually really great because it helps you create specific or common functions or infrastructures that actually have already been addressed by other applications. So it helps teams save time and they can focus on new parts of the applications they're building. So with that, once you've successfully built your diagram and it meets your needs, you can actually save it. This is going a little fast, I'm sorry. As mentioned, users can update the survey multiple times. So when further edits are made, though, the system will prompt actually to change it back to draft mode. So you can add those additional changes or update the diagram. This is valuable because your survey can always stay accurate and up to date. So as you continue working on and modifying your project, these can still be crucial and stay in par with pending discussions and team collaboration. And then again, you can see I turned off database. Before proceeding to the diagram again, the system always provides the latest update on what has changed in the survey. So in this case, the manual and implied components that were made from the front end selection. And then navigating back to the diagram, you might see that the survey actually triggered an out of sync notification. So this notification indicates that a new front end component has been identified. So you either have the option to accept or actually change, accept the change or defer it. So if you choose to accept it, obviously you see the new front end component in the diagram. And then this really allows you to immediately start editing and integrating into the new component and then align it with the existing model. So you can adjust its properties. Obviously, I'm moving it around. And then, of course, if you defer it, you can exclude it if necessary or when you find necessary to add it in. And then additionally, at the top right corner, that diagram box, this actually shows you the identified threats. So it highlights potential threats your application actually might face based off the components you actually have added into your diagram or survey. And then moving into the summary countermeasures, the system will prompt you to save again. As you see, I accidentally didn't save, and it just makes sure that it updates maintain. So quickly, I'm going to pause, if you can pause here quickly, just because this goes really fast. So there's two configurations here before you make it to the actual countermeasures page. Project classification, which it determines the priority of the project. This is really valuable because you can either set it manually or within SD Elements, we actually have survey answers that can actually leverage and change the project classification. So for example, if you selected credit card information or something along those lines, that will actually, it could trigger maybe a higher priority of the project classifications. So these are really valuable to show like the priorities. And then the second one, you can actually continue and play now, is the risk policy. So this could be influenced by the project classifications or manually selected. We do offer default options. For example, there's the highest risk policy, which only shows tasks at priorities 8 or higher. So users can also create their own custom risk policy too, linking it to project classifications or basing it off organizational regulations. So that's really powerful. This has really jumped into the countermeasure page. You'll see that you can navigate through all of these different tabs. They go from covering activities from architecture to development, deployment, and testing stages. So these are all answers that came from your components and survey answers. And you could actively manage these countermeasures and update the status, as you see I'm doing right now. These are really important because you can, before you sync it to maybe like a Jira or any issue tracker, you can have that transparency between here and going into your Jira for developers to actually know what's already been mitigated. So I think that's very powerful to make sure that you go here. And then if you can pause quickly, because sorry, I have to pause a couple of times because it went a little bit faster. Here is now where we get to the good stuff. So just to preface what this page is and why we're here today, we're setting up a project connection. So here in this page is where you actually set up the Jira connect or like your issue tracker connections. But in this case, we're going to go straight to the Checkmarx One integration. So if you press play, so the parent connection here, which has been configured behind the scenes, it includes the authentication setup at the highest SDE level, which we'll show later. And it provides Checkmarx One server details and credentials to authorize that API access to really fetch the scans. You'll see here, I'm putting CX SaaS here for the project name. This is not related to the Checkmarx SaaS only tool, which we do also support. This in Checkmarx One, we only support SaaS, Checkmarx One SaaS results as with hopes to really expand. Within the scan results, you'll see here, we can automate the sync process, pre-selecting specific intervals. And of course, we need the project ID you'll see here. And then here you can see that I'm actually changing specific behaviors. So with the scan results, you can actually choose to aggregate or replace them. As well, you can actually change statuses based off the results we receive. So that's helpful in terms of making sure we can stay true to what the results are. Then you'll see here, once you save them, there's options to edit, delete, or manually trigger. And then here I'm going to actually manually sync. So I'll pass it off to David to actually go through Checkmarx One.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sarah. Maybe you can pause Chip so I can also make an intro before the start of this. Okay, so that was great, Sarah. We saw really how to start and how we can in just a couple of minutes have our threat model thanks to the questionnaire and also with the diagram. And eventually, at the end of the day, what we get is a threat model, which is related to an application that needs to be developed with countermeasures, which are like the security by design requirements that need to be developed. Now, let's say that the developer or the team has already started the development. They implemented some of the functional features. They implemented some of the security countermeasures recommended by Security Compass and SD Elements. And now they're using check marks in order to scan their code and make sure their code is secure. They can use it in different stages. They can use it per commit, pull request, part of their CI/CD. Each customers can decide the way they want to use checkmarks. And here in this case, I'm showing you the checkmarks one interface where I have this test project. That test project is actually the project that the customer needs to implement. And that implementation is covered from the security by design with SD Elements. If you noticed, when the integration was configured by Sarah a couple of minutes ago, she introduced a project ID. That project ID is actually the checkmarks project ID that is related to that threat model. Now, what we'll see in this demonstration is how the checkmarks one results are actually being used within the Security Compass to decide whether a countermeasure has been successfully completed or not. But first, I want to give you an overview of the checkmarks one platform. So this is a project view where the customers can see project. We have customers with hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of projects. They can be pulled from different sources, SCMs, or directly via zip file from the CI/CD process. And we show here different stages. When I go deeper into a specific project, I can see the risk posture of that specific project being a source code repository. I can see the vulnerabilities, the results of the different scans, and the evolution over time of the risk posture of that specific project, related also to the different compliance frameworks that the company might have to comply to. I could go to the scan history. There I can see the different results of the scan, and I can generate reports for this specific scan that I can later on use within my organizations. These are different views per scanner that gives key KPI information in order to understand what is the result and the posture of the security from a SaaS perspective, SEA, API security, infrastructure as code, etc. Okay, now when I want to go deeper into a specific scan, I can go to a SaaS scan. Now I want to see the different results of that SaaS scan. So I can go to see results. There are different ways to access the results. Here it's a project that has been implemented in both Java and JavaScript, and I can see per language the different issues. Can you make a pause here? Okay, so here I went to the SaaS results, SaaS source code repositories, and if you can see, I've selected one specific issue, which is the use of a hard-coded password. Okay, obviously something that I should prevent. Now, Checkmarx is presenting different pieces of information, and we see later on that this had an impact with the security countermeasure that SD Elements asked or presented for the developer to implement. On the left-hand side, I have what we call the attack vector. When Checkmarx scan SaaS, it's not just a linter, right? We're really doing code analysis. We analyze the full source code repository, we detect attack vectors, and on the left-hand side from the sync node to the source node, we see where the attack vector stands, for which different files and methods we have an attack vector, and where the best fixed location, where the issue lands and where it should be fixed. You can continue. So not only we show you the code and where the issue is actually being found, we also show you a description of the issue, and we also give you, as you remember, I talked about code bashing, we give you also a link to the specific vulnerability and the training path that could be interesting for the developer to follow in order to understand and know how to fix it. So here I'm going to the attack vector of a different vulnerability, which is the XSS vulnerability. And I show you how we're related to code bashing and to the training that can help you understand and fix this vulnerability. I can decide to do triage decisions and change the priority of this vulnerability. Now this is for SaaS, and obviously SD Elements is integrated within SaaS for Checkmarx One and for SaaS on-prem. Now, when I go to Checkmarx, and this is something interesting, maybe we can pause here. The way the SaaS engines works at Checkmarx is that it's analyzing your code, it's building a tree, logical tree of your code to find attack vectors, and then it's actually running queries on top of this tree in order to find the vulnerabilities. And these queries, you can see there now, These queries are editable, are customizable. We have different presets that we recommend to our customers to use depending on their maturity, depending on their needs. And this really allows to have the best SaaS results that is fitting the customer needs. Now, SaaS is just one piece of the problem, and this is the piece that is mostly interesting for this integration. But I think it's important also to discuss that we do support SEA, open source package, vulnerability detection, both from a vulnerability standpoint, but also from a licensing perspective. We also have a malicious package detection based on a proprietary threat intelligence database that our AppSec research team is building every day. Here you can see the legal risks that are associated to some of the packages being used into that project. And what is really interesting also when you think about the platform of Checkmarx One is when you run SaaS and SEA together, you can have what we called the, can you make a pause here, please, Chip? You can do what we call the exploitable path. The exploitable path is the ability to not only say, well, we found in your SBOM or we found in your definitions that you are connected to 2,000 open source packages. We really analyze with our SaaS engine which method of which package you are actually using. And if the package is vulnerable, we actually analyze which method of this package is vulnerable. And this really reduces the noise of the SE results, because the vulnerabilities we tell you that we found about a specific package is a real vulnerability. It's about a vulnerable package that you're using a vulnerable method within that package. We can tell you which part of your code, which could be one specific place or different places, you're actually using that method. And this is the exploitable path of that open source package. You can continue, Chip. Thank you. We also analyze the API inventory of your code. Again, this is just your code inventory of APIs. We can show you which APIs is dealing with sensitive data, which API is documented properly or not documented properly, which leaves you attainable from attacks from the API gateways. And we can actually go down to the source code of the specific API endpoints and show you where that endpoint is being implemented and where the vulnerability lies. So again, this is the power of a platform managing different engines and showing you the vulnerabilities from different angles. Obviously, we are integrated within the full software development lifecycle. We have IDE plugins for developers. It can be implemented through CI/CDs. We have, as you can see, many different plugins for all the CI/CDs of the market. We implemented in the tickets system and reporting systems, as it's very easy also to configure and to create a new integration, like it was also very easy on SD Elements. This is obviously a key element to move forward. Now I leave it to Sarah to comment on the SaaS scan that we just performed on this application measure status.
Perfect. Yeah, if you could just, I think this should be fine. Chip, you can continue here. Yeah, so thanks, David. I think you showcased the project. So naturally we can see that the sync actually did go through, and we can see the vulnerabilities that David highlighted. So if we actually go into the requirements, you can see that we'll showcase that. So T35, which was the fine-tuned HTTP server settings, has actually passed. So based off the behavioral configurations that I showcased, we actually can say that it has a pass to it, and then it will actually show the note referencing the scan result that David actually showcased. And then you can see here, I don't know if you remember because it went fast, but do not hard code passwords were actually complete before the scan, but they moved to incomplete based off the configurations I had done. And so it will show the details, the findings of the vulnerabilities identified from this, as well as a scan link back to the specific scan result. And then as well, we have the partial pass. These indicate that a task that didn't have enough information to provide a definite pass or fail, so it would remain an impartial pass, but it still will link back to the latest scan that it's referring to. So you can see here, you'll open back up and you'll be redirected back into the same page that David started with, and I'll break that down. And then lastly, really the big question is, how do we connect those vulnerabilities from Checkmarx to SD countermeasures, which I can show you. Mentioned the global connector where the Checkmarx One global connection is. So here we actually provide default mapping, as you can see, which we work with a third-party partner who works with also Checkmarx, and they provide us the mappings of the latest vulnerabilities. They get updated on a quarterly basis, and then we update them according to like our countermeasures to their vulnerabilities at that time. So here you can see we do allow users to quarterly update these, or sorry, not quarterly update, but they can actually edit these and append their own, because within SD Elements, we have our out of the box content, but we also include the ability to add their own custom countermeasures. So they can actually append these. And then you can see there is, this went too fast. If you can go back a little, Chip. The very end here. Yeah, if you could just pause here. Perfect, thank you. So if you see, I think actually it was before that, but it's okay. On one of the columns, there is the confidence level. So by default, we have low, but you do have the desire, you do have the ability to actually change it if necessary. So that allows customers, if they feel, depending on their workflow, if they would like to change the level of confidence between the vulnerability mappings. As well, there is also a column for CWE. I think we originally had mappings there legacy-wise, and we do map CWEs between the vulnerabilities and the countermeasures that SD Elements offer. But when it comes to customization, and we offer customers the ability to add their own countermeasures in there, we do advise them that they would add their own additional tasks with mapping to the vulnerability names that you see here. Did I miss anything else in this page? No. So this brings us to the end of the demo. And I think we can.
Yeah, it's really powerful to see the integration of both platforms. And we talked a lot about improving developer experience. And I think the integrations is a big part of this, especially delivering requirements to developers earlier on in the development lifecycle. So with that, let's turn over any questions from the audience. Okay. So one question that came in is, how can my organization adapt to the changing threat landscape?
You want me to take that one?
Sure, yeah.
So it's a very good question, and it's not an easy answer because the threat landscape is, first of all, changing very fast. If we look at the cybersecurity attacks of the past 5 years, we're in a completely different position. And also with the adoption of AI, we see so many different attack surfaces that were completely not existent a couple of years ago. I think you need to choose the right partner for your enterprise, a partner that invests in AppSec research, that invests, and you can see in the news, like Checkmarx, we're publishing on LinkedIn, we're publishing in the news, the findings of our research team that trying to make the world a safer place. And you need also to make a partner with enterprises that speak to each other and that help each other, like Security Compass and Checkmarx. Like this partner program it's not something that is obvious because you guys are so shift left, and even like before writing code, we are so focused on code and development. But eventually, when speaking to each other and understanding that there are automation, that we can work together, we can share information to bring to customer a better experience, and to every personas, for CISOs, for AppSec, and for developers, I think it's important to partner with companies that can adapt fast and have an open strategy in terms of creating new features, new use cases, and serving and listening to their customers. I think this is key, and I think this is one of the demonstration of the approach of both Security Compass with SD Elements and Checkmarx with Checkmarx One, of taking the lead in these different topics to help our customers eventually to adapt faster and get advices. We have a lot of QBRs that we do with customers in order to listen to them and to understand their pain points and provide solutions to them.
I think, David, just to follow what you said, I couldn't agree more. It's ideally you would have to do this manually. I think that we talk about the threat landscape, it's just we're seeing just the amount of attacks increase year over year, and especially too if we talk about software today, but let's say, for instance, you also obscure firmware, hardware, you are selling in kind of different locales. It can be impossible to keep up with this. So let an SD Elements and the Checkmarx do this for you. As you saw, we can deliver the right requirements based on kind of the server you answer with SD Elements. We will deliver those requirements right to you and right in their developer's workflow. Checkmarx do the same, so you do not have to do this work yourself. And the second question I have here is, do you have recommendations in order to align AppSec with business goals?
Yeah, I can take this one. I think for like, when I think about it, like what we've talked about as the common pattern of, it's all about shift left, right? And I think it starts there first, making sure there's collaboration, making sure there's communication. I think between organizations, they need to have a shared goal on the objectives coming from every type of persona, because that's really where it starts. At the end of the day, an application doesn't end once it's done development. It will always be value, like it will always have to be monitored throughout their existence of that application. So I think my recommendation is like continue that collaboration, continue those like maturity of building these very powerful tools into their realm. Because I think your business goals will always change, but as long as there's continuous collaboration and communication between all areas of your tool, I think that's going to really help and aid like the AppSec alignment with your organization. Vulnerabilities do not sleep is what I say. They will come and find you. So it's important that your business goals are always changing with what's happening in the AppSec world.
I think one thing I want to add to it, I think historically we see application security as sitting in the cost center side of things, but with the stats we showed everyone earlier about, because 90% of applications have breached through applications, it actually be considered on the revenue side as well. That, for instance, increasing your application security posture has business benefits. It might allow you to expand more into new markets. It might allow you to reduce incidence of fines. So I think it's part of the change management is a bit challenging, is that application security is a competitive advantage, it's a business advantage, and it can increase revenue by decreasing incidence of risk or not passing audits or just compliance violations or fines.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned it because we actually commissioned Forrester to do a total economic impact on the Checkmarx One solution. And Forrester proved that, speaking with our customers, that the ROI of adopting Checkmarx was 177% after the first year. So that's something that is really aligned with the business goals of companies, that it's not only a matter of I need to be compliant and I need to check the boxes. It's really about applying the right processes and using the right tools like Checkmarx and SD Elements in order to be able to succeed in reaching these business goals.
No, 100%. That's
Doesn't seem to be any other questions. I want to thank you all for attending this webinar. Again, if you have additional questions or want to connect further, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn. We're always happy to discuss this further. But again, thank you everyone for attending. Hope everyone has a good rest of the day.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chip and Sarah. This was a great event. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
thank you.
Take care.